Did you know an elephant, a chimpanzee, a seal, and a dolphin have all been recorded saying human words? Mimicry isn't rare in the animal world. You already know parrots do it. These four aren't parrots, which is what makes them stranger. Half the talking animal clips on your feed right now are AI-generated fakes with nothing real behind them. These aren't. Everyone is published and peer-reviewed, and the evidence behind each is stronger or shakier than you'd expect. The strongest evidence belongs to an Asian elephant named Koshik. In 2004, staff at Everland Zoo in South Korea noticed him attempting to copy their speech. Koshik was born in captivity in 1990 and moved to the zoo 3 years later, where he lived alongside two female elephants for a couple of years before being kept completely alone for the next 7. His only real bond during that stretch was with his trainer, Kim, and researchers now believe that isolation is exactly why he started imitating human sound in the first place. Elephants have no lips built for shaping human speech, so Koshik improvised. He pushed the tip of his trunk inside his own mouth and moved his jaw to reshape his vocal tract, a technique researchers had never documented in any elephant before. Early footage showed him standing at attention in the zoo's training hall, trunk in mouth. Producing sound staff transcribed as chowa, anyong, and anja. That footage eventually reached elephant communication researcher Joyce Poole, and in November 2012, a team led by Angela Stoger of the University of Vienna formally published the case in Current Biology, confirming a 5-word vocabulary: Anyong for hello, anja for sit down, anya for no, nuo for lie down, and joa for good. To test it rigorously, researchers played the raw recordings to native Korean speakers with zero context and asked them to write down what they heard. The listeners agreed almost perfectly on both meaning and spelling. The clearest technical proof was frequency analysis. Koshik's imitations matched the pitch of his trainer's voice, not another elephant's, something scientists had assumed only our closest relatives might eventually manage, and even they, it turns out, could only ever manage the crudest version of it. They were also careful to note there's no conclusive evidence Koshik understands what he's saying, only that he's reliably imitating the sound, an honest caveat that Batir never got. Batir was an elephant at a Kazakhstan zoo in the 1980s, rumored to speak over 20 Russian and Kazakh phrases. But nobody ever tested him scientifically, so his story stayed a rumor forever. And to this day, Koshik remains the only elephant whose speech has actually been confirmed rather than simply claimed. He still lives at Everland Zoo, and the recordings that convinced the University of Vienna team are the same ones now widely shared online, which means the viral clip and the peer-reviewed evidence happen for once to be exactly the same audio. The strangest case didn't start with an animal being studied at all. It started with an infant being raised as one. In 1947, psychologist Keith Hayes and his wife Catherine adopted a days-old chimpanzee named Vicky at the Yerkes Laboratories in Orange Park, Florida, and raised her exactly like a human child, clothes, potty training, and speech therapy included, right down to physically shaping her lips and jaw by hand to help her find the right sound. After years of that effort, Vicky could produce 4 words: mama, papa, up, and cup, though only as a hoarse, barely recognizable whisper missing every vowel. By the 1980s, most scientists had written the experiment off as a failure.
Vicky quiso leer mamá, 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 mamá.
And an ethically troubling one, given what separating an infant from its mother actually does to it. Nobody had ever formally analyzed Vicky's actual voice until a Swedish speech scientist, Axel Ekström of the KTH Royal Institute of Technology, went looking for surviving recordings and found her in a 1959 educational film. Using spectrograms, he compared his own recorded papa and cup to hers and confirmed she reliably reproduced the same sound pattern every time. Real learned imitation, not noise, but built from just 2 popping consonant sounds with no vowel between them. Ekström's team then dug up 2 more forgotten recordings, a chimpanzee named Johnny from Florida and one named Renata from a 1962 Italian.
Can you say mama? Mama?
Mama.
Is this for mama?
Mama.
You love your mama?
Mama.
You love mama?
Mama.
Here, sweetie.
Newsreel. both filmed saying "Mama" for a treat. This time, 61 volunteers listened to the clips blind and wrote down what they heard. And unlike Vicky, both Johnny and Renata were judged to add a genuine vowel after the consonant, essentially completing the word. Published in Scientific Reports in 2024, the study concluded chimpanzees do possess the neural building blocks for speech, just not the vocal tract to fully use them, turning 70 years of failed ape experiments into partial proof science simply hadn't measured properly yet. Long before either of them, there was Hoover, a harbor seal who lived at the New England Aquarium from 1971 until 1985. A fisherman had rescued Hoover as an orphaned pup and raised him almost like a family dog, talking to him constantly in a thick New England accent through the first stretch of his life before handing him over to the aquarium. Hoover eventually said his own name aloud, then built a small working vocabulary. "Hello there," "Get out of here," and "Come over," delivered in a garbled, slurring voice that one aquarium worker described as sounding like a male human with a Boston accent. Researchers who later published the case in the Canadian Journal of Zoology suspected that raising Hoover away from other seals during a critical stage of development had pushed him toward human sound instead of seal calls, and noted that this kind of mimicry tends to show up specifically when exposure to speech comes bundled with a close bond to a caretaker. That pattern matters because what genuinely surprised researchers was that nobody had to keep rewarding Hoover to continue. Long after the novelty had worn off for his keepers, he kept talking on his own, with no food and no audience, right up until his death in 1985. Later studies found harbor seals have unusually flexible throat and laryngeal structures compared to most marine mammals, a physical head start that let researchers go on to deliberately train other young seals to speak, using Hoover's case as proof it was even possible. His published case actually predates Koshik's and the orca studies that came decades later, which is worth remembering. This phenomenon isn't a new discovery, just one science quietly confirmed long before any of it went viral, and the gap between his tested case and unverified aquarium rumors elsewhere is the same gap that later separated Koshik from Batir. The newest case is also the shakiest, which is worth knowing before you share it. In April 2025, a researcher named Jack Kasowitz, whose research group has spent years trying to decode dolphin communication, released a paper titled Novel Dolphin Vocalization, reporting that a dolphin named Zeus had produced 4 distinct vowel-like sounds resembling the letters A, E, O, and U. Dolphins have no vocal cords or lips at all. They generate every sound through air sacs near the blowhole, which makes any resemblance to human vowels genuinely strange to hear. It isn't even unprecedented among dolphins specifically. A bottlenose dolphin named Tanner at a Florida research center was separately taught to replicate the human word spit. And dolphins at a Marine Mammal Institute in Mississippi have shown similar vocal flexibility, which suggests Zeus isn't a one-off fluke, just the latest and least tested entry in a pattern researchers have been circling for decades.
Fish in basket.
To be clear, the recording itself is real. No AI generated Zeus's sounds. The AI only came in afterward, helping researchers analyze frequencies too fast for human ears to parse, which is a completely different thing from the fully fabricated animal voice clips flooding your feed with nothing real behind them at all. That distinction is exactly what got lost in this video's opening question. And it's the one worth remembering the next time a suspiciously perfect talking animal clip crosses your screen. But unlike Koshik's or Johnny and Renata's research, this paper never ran through a journal like Current Biology or Scientific Reports, and skipped that same kind of blind listener testing. It was self-published and shared through a private research group chasing a much bigger, still unproven ambition: real two-way conversation between humans and dolphins someday. That goal might be worth chasing, but right now the evidence sits closer to the anecdotal end of the same scale that once left Batir's story unproven, which makes it the least verified entry on this list. Vocal learning like this is genuinely rare in nature, having evolved independently in only a handful of lineages: some birds, elephants, a few great apes, cetaceans, and us. Which is exactly why these 4 cases keep turning up in the same conversation, and why the real ranking runs elephant, chimpanzee, seal, then dolphin, from strongest evidence to weakest. That's the science behind talking animals. Verified, not viral. Subscribe for more.